Having been given approval for their groundwater management plan, Adani are one step closer to beginning major operations on the Adani coal mine. To say that this project is controversial is very much an understatement. Ever since it was first proposed by Adani, there's been a long battle over whether the mine will be built, with many local and grassroots groups being against the mine, while some major politicians and political parties, including the current Liberal National Coalition federal government, support the mine's construction. At the same time, polling has shown that around 2/3 of Australians are against the mine's construction. So, with all of this controversy and disagreement, we need to ask, why support the Adani coal mine? First, for those who haven't been paying attention to national politics over the last decade, we need to go through what the Adani coal mine is. It's actually called the Carmichael Coal Mine Project, and it's a series of coal mines proposed by the Adani Mining Corporation to be built in the north of the Galilee Basin in central Queensland. The entire project would consist of 45 kilometres of open-cut and underground coal mines, including 6 open-cut pits and 5 underground mines. Additionally, about 388 kilometres of rail line, including about 310 kilometres connecting the northern Galilee Basin to the port of Abbott Point, would be constructed to act as infrastructure for the mine. Adani has stated that it expects the mine to produce 2.3 billion tonnes of coal over a 50 to 60 year lifespan, and it would be the largest coal mine in Australia and one of the largest in the world. Proponents of the mine state that it would help the economy through the creation of roughly 10,000 jobs and would therefore be a great benefit for Queensland. Adani have also used this jobs figure as a reason to ask both the state government of Queensland and the federal government of Australia for financial loans as a means of helping to fund the project. The latest of these has been Adani's ask for a loan of about $900 million with very generous terms from the Northern Australia Infrastructure Fund to build the rail line for the mine. This loan was approved by the federal government but then vetoed by the Queensland state government. Grassroots groups against the mine point out that the Adani Corporation have a clearly recorded history of corruption, bribery, human rights abuses, tax avoidance, and environmental mismanagement, and are currently facing criminal investigations for alleged involvement in multi-billion-dollar fraud in India. Some examples of these appalling actions by the Adani Corporation include, but are not limited to, the following. In August of 2011, an unseaworthy Adani coal ship sank off the coast of Mumbai in India, spilling 60,054 metric tons of coal into the ocean. Adani did nothing to clean up the mess for 5 years, while the spill destroyed mangroves, polluted beaches, and caused serious damage to the local marine environment and Mumbai's tourism industry, for which they were later found liable in a court of law. In the coastal town of Mundra in India, Adani operates one of the largest coal-fired power plants in the world. Investigations of the Mundra project by Indian officials, independent committees, and documentary film crews reveal a record of environmental destruction, harm to local communities, and a failure to comply with environmental regulation and development permits. The outcome for the local villages was catastrophic. Having traditionally relied on fishing and farming to survive, they are now left with barren lands and ocean, with their fish stocks decimated. Villagers have reported that Adani have used bribery and intimidation to silence anyone who tries to challenge them. Adani, who do not have approval to begin work at their Hazira port, illegally destroyed mangroves and claimed land, blocking access to traditional fishing areas for fishing families from the village of Hazira. In January 2016, Adani was ordered to pay $4.8 million for compensation and restoration and had their environmental approval revoked. In India, Adani have engaged in broad-ranging bribery to conceal the illegal export of 7.7 million tonnes of iron ore from India. In 2011, the Ombudsman of the Indian state of Karnataka investigated the corruption and discovered a staggering scale of bribery. Adani had bribed the police, local politicians, customs officials, the State Pollution Control Board, the Port Department, and the Weight and Measurement Department in return for facilitating and hiding their illegal exports. And finally, for an example closer to home, In February of 2019, reports from Adani confirmed that the company was fined $13,055 for releasing water polluted with dangerous levels of coal contamination from its Abbott Point coal port into the neighbouring Cayley Valley wetlands on the 7th of February. The Cayley Valley wetlands are nationally significant and sit on the coast beside the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. This is the second time they have released dangerous levels of coal-contaminated water into the wetlands in 2 years. Instead of revising their method of operation to comply with the law and their own license agreements, they have instead been running an advertising blitz to try and pressure the Queensland government into giving approvals for the Carmichael coal mine. Additionally, they have made large financial donations to political parties as a means of gaining favour in Parliament. The Liberal and National parties that form a coalition government in federal parliament, who recently approved Adani's groundwater management plan, have received a total of at least $60,800 in financial donations from Adani or its subsidiaries since the last federal election in 2016. They have made more donations to the Liberal and National parties in previous years, but finding solid information on amounts is quite difficult due to very weak donations disclosure laws. So it seems clear that Adani are not the right company to handle this kind of a large project with such a history of environmentally destructive actions, carelessness towards human rights, and damning examples of corruption. But let's assume for a second that Adani could do the project properly and look after the environment around the coal mine, as well as the Great Barrier Reef where coal will be shipped through if the mine goes ahead. Yes, this is a fantasy, but hypothetically, if this could happen, would the Carmichael coal mine project be a positive action for Australia? To answer this question, we need to look at the economic argument for the mine in great detail. First, it is claimed that the Carmichael coal mine project will create 10,000 jobs. On the surface, this seems quite positive. A large amount of jobs created would be very much a benefit for Queensland. The problem with this supposedly impressive jobs figure is that in April of 2015, Adani's own expert, Jerome Farah, stated that only 1,464 jobs would be created, a much smaller figure than the 10,000 jobs claimed. This much smaller figure has been confirmed by independent estimates and studies as well. So it seems that Adani's Carmichael mine project will not create many jobs. What about taxes? If the project could produce a large amount of tax revenue, then that can be spent on infrastructure which will produce many jobs and would be a great benefit to the Queensland economy. Unfortunately, Adani are experts at avoiding taxation. They have a convoluted network of 38 subsidiary companies, 26 of which are registered here in Australia, all designed to avoid as much tax as possible by siphoning revenue into tax havens. The Carmichael rail line, for example, is ultimately owned by an Adani entity operating out of the Cayman Islands, which is a notorious tax haven. This presents a clear risk that money will be siphoned offshore, with there being no returns for the Australian taxpayer. Additionally, in the 2014 to 2015 financial year, Adani paid no tax on $350 million of revenue in Australia. So it seems that we cannot count on Adani's Carmichael coal mine to produce tax revenue either. But what about royalties? Royalties from the coal produced by the mine would be a benefit in much the same way that taxes would. Adani are currently seeking a royalties holiday of 5 years, which means that not only will we receive no taxes from the mine, but also no royalties for the first 5 years. Additionally, economists and investment firms who have studied the viability of the Carmichael coal mine project have stated on record that the mine is not economically viable due to coal prices falling rapidly. The reason for this rapid fall in coal prices is that coal is in large oversupply, with demand for coal falling rapidly all around the world. Even India, the country we are told much of this coal is to be shipped to, is trying to end all coal imports by 2020. This effectively means that there will likely be no royalties from the mine in the short term at all, and very little royalties in the long term. So it seems that Australia will likely not see any real benefit from royalties from the Carmichael coal mine project as well. So far, we have very few jobs being created, likely no tax revenue from the mine's operations, and very little to no royalties either. But there is still a part of the economic argument that we are missing. The part of the economic argument surrounding the mine which tends to be overlooked is the Great Barrier Reef. The reef supports 64,000 jobs and brings in $6.4 billion into the economy every year, with 39,000 of those jobs being directly from the reef. This makes the Great Barrier Reef the largest source of employment in Australia, employing more people than companies like Telstra, Qantas, National Australia Bank, and Kmart. Why is this so important? Because scientific bodies and independent research organisations have stated that if the Adani mine goes ahead, it will lead to a greater increase in greenhouse gas emissions from the burning of the coal it produces, and this will speed up global warming and the effects of climate change, which will cause serious damage to the reef's ecosystem and in the long term will cause all of its coral to die off. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority has stated in a report that coral bleaching due to ocean warming associated with climate change has impacted coral reefs worldwide, including the Great Barrier Reef. Mass coral bleaching events occur during extended periods of elevated sea surface temperatures and have the potential to result in significant and widespread loss of coral. With the Great Barrier Reef experiencing 2 events of mass coral bleaching in 2 years, in which 30% of its coral died in 2016 and another 20% in 2017, something which has never been seen before, it's not hard to see how that's true. So, in summary, the economic situation for the Adani coal mine is that even if the Adani Corporation manages the environment perfectly, which with their track record is a fantasy, is as follows. The coal mine will only create 1,464 jobs. We will most likely not receive any tax revenue from Adani. The government will likely receive very little or no royalties from the mining operations, and the greenhouse gas emissions from the burning of coal produced by the mine will help to destroy the Great Barrier Reef. This leaves us with a net result of a loss of between 37,536 jobs and 62,536 jobs, around $6.25 billion in lost economic activity each year, and the loss of tax revenue from that economic activity, not to mention the loss of the natural wonder of the world that is the Great Barrier Reef. With figures like these, it's not hard to see why the overwhelming majority of Australians are against the mine. So, with Adani having a track record that makes environmental protection a fantasy, around 2/3 of all Australians being against the mine, the economic argument for the mine falling apart under any real scrutiny, and the Liberal and National parties taking very large financial donations from the Adani Corporation, we need to ask, why do they really support the mine?